Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is probably one of the most popular how to get rich books in the market. Since it was published in 1997, it sold over 32 million copies and has been on the New York Times bestseller list for many years. However, the reception on this book is mixed. There are those who say Rich Dad, Poor Dad changed their lives, whereas there are those that swear it is a scam. So who is right? Is it really life-changing, or is the whole book something that you should just completely ignore? Well, like most things in life, the answer is not that simple. There's never going to be a financial group that we'll all agree 100% on because we're all different individuals with different life experiences and worldview. However, I do think there are a lot of good lessons from this book, though some I agree we should probably take with a grain of salt. So in the spirit of always learning, let me review 10 takeaways from the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And hi, if you're new to the channel, my name is Tay from Financial Tortoise, where we learn to grow our wealth slow and steady. The number one lesson from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This one sounds like one of those lines that came out of a Hallmark card, but it makes sense. Don't just work for money, have money work for you. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. The book starts out with Robert Kiyosaki as a 9-year-old learning the lessons of wealth from his best friend's father, who from the perspective of the book is the rich dad. His biological dad is the poor dad who spent his whole life in education. By having Robert work for pennies, then later nothing, the rich dad taught him that a job was only to learn something, and not for the monthly salary, which eventually led Robert and his friend to start a comic book library and rent them out to make money. By starting our own business, the comic book library, we were in control of our own finances, not dependent on an employer. The best part was that our business generated money for us even when we weren't physically there. Our money worked for us. Based on this story, we could easily conclude that if you want to have money work for you, you need to start a business like Robert and his friend. However, this is a narrow takeaway from this lesson. I believe the concept of having money work for you can be applied more broadly, to include many things that enable you to escape trading time for money. That could be investing in the stock market, real estate, or other people's businesses. If you want to build wealth, always think, where is the best place where my money could be working for me? The number 2 lesson from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The importance of financial education. This one I really like. The single most powerful asset we all have is our mind. If it is trained well, it can create enormous wealth. Our formal K-12 education system does not teach personal finance. I don't know if things have improved since I graduated school, but I sure wasn't taught the basics of money when I was in school. I learned most of my money lessons through making a lot of mistakes as an adult. Therefore, it's not a surprise that we hear stories of lottery winners going bankrupt and professional athletes who were able to command millions in signing bonus living under a bridge many years later. What do you expect when you drop $1 million in the lap of someone who doesn't have strong financial education? It's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. They spend it all on a bunch of things they don't need, give it out to people they want to impress, and fail to protect it. It's similar to giving a child uncontrolled access to Charlie Wonka's chocolate factory. They will literally eat themselves to diabetes. Money comes and goes, but if you have the education about how money works, you gain power over it and can begin building wealth. So what are the specific money knowledge that we want in our toolkit? Well, we can't cover it all in a single book, but Robert does give a good starting place, which leads to the next lesson. The number 3 lesson from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The 4 pillars that make up financial IQ. I like how Robert Kiyosaki does go into specific technical skills to focus on building your financial knowledge. The first one being accounting. Accounting is possibly the most confusing, boring subject in the world, but if you want to be rich long-term, it could be the most important subject. You don't need to go out and become a certified public accountant, but if you can understand what an income statement is, a balance sheet, and the difference between assets and liabilities, you know more than most people out there. 2. Investing. Robert Kiyosaki calls investing the science of money making money. It's probably not the most accurate description of investing, but hey, it sounds pretty cool. What falls within this bucket can be pretty broad, but think of stock market, real estate, and businesses. Pretty much anything that can give you a return. Going back to our first point where money is working for you instead of you working for it. Third pillar. Understanding markets. In the words of Robert Kiyosaki, the science of supply and demand. This one could sort of fall under the investing bucket, but no harm in specifically calling it out. Essentially, you want to understand the market that you're investing in. If you're investing in a broad market index fund, what market are the companies operating in? Is it a broad US-based index, or is it focused on developing international market? If you're investing in real estate, what is the real estate market condition of where your property is located? Fourth pillar, the law. This one is good because it gets overlooked often. The author specifies this pillar into additional buckets: tax advantage and protection from lawsuits. Whatever vehicle you're using to grow your net worth with, stock market, real estate, or small businesses, you want to minimize taxes by understanding the relevant tax laws. And you want to understand ways to protect your wealth, whether that is through appropriate incorporation or insurance. Depending on how you want to grow your wealth, your pillars of financial knowledge will look different. But I think this framework is a good starting place if you've never systematically looked at your financial intelligence this way. Before we move on, I want to take a moment to thank today's video sponsor, Shortform. When I find a book I like, I don't just like to read them from cover to cover, but I want to extract every ounce of value from them. Understand all the major ideas, the takeaways, and even the nuanced insight from the author. This is where Shortform is a platform like no other. Shortform produced some of the best guides to nonfiction books I've seen in the market. And don't think of them just as book summaries. No, Shortform is actually way more than that, making it quite unique in the book summary industry. Their guides not only cover all the book's key ideas, but add commentary as well as detailed analysis. I especially love how they reference other related books in their guide. Some of my favorite genres are money and finance, self-improvement, and business. I especially enjoy their take on books like Atomic Habits, The Simple Path to Wealth, and I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I've actually used it quite a bit in making many of my book takeaway videos. If you enjoyed my take on Rich Dad Poor Dad so far, you'll love Shortform. Shortform is also constantly expanding their library by dropping new book guides and articles every week. And subscribers like you and I even get to vote on which books they should cover next. If you join through my special link, shortform.com/tay, you'll get a free trial of unlimited access to Shortform, plus an additional 20% discount on annual subscription. That equates to almost half off for the year compared to the standard monthly plan. Knowledge is power, so add to your arsenal of knowledge by checking out Shortform. The number 4 lesson from Rich Dad Poor Dad: the importance of communication skills. The way I look at it, the reason why Rich Dad Poor Dad is so popular isn't because it's the best personal finance book in the market. It's because Robert Kiyosaki is so good at communicating, to a point where I will almost call him a marketing genius. I mean, just take a look at the book subtitle. What the rich teach their kids about money, that the poor and the middle class do not. I mean, who wouldn't want to click on that if it was a link to a video or blog post? And that is the reason why his book has sold so well. So even though you may not agree with Robert Kiyosaki and everything in his book, I think there's a lot to learn from how he sells. And though he only touches on it briefly, he talks about the importance of sales and marketing as an essential skill to building wealth. Communication skills such as writing, speaking, and negotiating are crucial to a life of success. So then why is it that more people don't focus on developing their communication skills if it's so important and could make them into a best-selling author? The reason is because it's so hard to master. Survey from Wall Street Journal showed that public speaking was ranked the #1 fear among people. We're all naturally afraid of rejection, afraid to put ourselves out there and be open to criticism. But when we don't develop good communication skills, our ability to grow and grow our wealth is capped. I've known so many smart individuals who know so much about their respective area of expertise, the stock market, engineering, medicine, but they struggle to move forward because they don't know how to communicate effectively. So whether you're in a traditional corporate job or running your own business, don't neglect developing your communication skills. It's a lifelong skill, and I feel any investment towards it will pay multiple times in dividends down the line. The number 5 lesson from Rich Dad Poor Dad: the simple explanation between assets and liabilities. Rich people acquire assets. The poor and the middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets. It's not real accounting, but it communicates well to most people. That's the reason why most people probably remember this definition of assets and liabilities better than what they learned in accounting class. Robert Kiyosaki goes and talks about how most people struggle financially because they don't understand the difference between an asset and a liability. It was never taught, or we were told complex definitions by other educated professionals such as bankers, accountants, and financial planners. Regardless of whether we agree with this definition or not, the bottom line is that it's important to understand how assets and liabilities play into our overall wealth. He takes a step further to explain how assets and liabilities, balance sheet items, relate to income statement items, income, and expense. An asset puts money in my pocket, a liability takes money out of my pocket. So if we want to build wealth, we should focus our efforts on buying assets. Index funds that appreciate, real estate properties that we can rent out, and businesses that generate profit. If we spend all our money on liabilities such as depreciating cars, expensive homes, and fancy toys, we will be poor or be stuck in the middle class rat race. Alright, let's take this concept a step further with the next lesson. The number 6 lesson from Rich Dad Poor Dad: the cash flow of the poor, the middle class, and the rich. Using the assets versus liability framework, Robert Kiyosaki explains different cash flow patterns. Essentially how you can tell the difference between the poor, the middle class, and the rich by how their cash flows through the different income and balance sheet quadrants. This is the cash flow pattern of a poor person. Money comes in via income, but everything goes out with expenses. Rent, food, transportation. Basic necessities. They can't afford to spend any more than their expenses. They're literally living hand to mouth. Now, the positive is that they're not buying any liabilities, but they also aren't buying any assets that could grow their net worth. This is the cash flow pattern of a person in the middle class. The middle class has a decent income from a decent job, so they have a little extra money to spend. But instead of buying assets that could grow their wealth, they spend it on liabilities. Mortgage on a big home, car loan on a brand new car, and school loan from their expensive college degree. And as their wages increase, their expenses increase as well because they're continually buying more liabilities to elevate their lifestyle. This is the cash flow pattern of a rich person. The rich, regardless of their income, spend their money on buying assets, not liabilities. Real estate, stocks, bonds, intellectual property. These assets provide cash flow that acts as their income, which is enough to cover their expenses. And because the assets they own continue to grow, and therefore their income, the rich get richer. I know it's a very simplistic view of different classes, but it's a good framework. It is true that cash flow tells a story of how a person handles money. And as obvious as it sounds, how a person handles their money is indicative of his or her financial future. The number 7 lesson from Rich Dad Poor Dad: The importance of paying yourself first. In order to move from the poor cash flow pattern to rich cash flow pattern, you want to develop self-discipline. One key one being paying yourself first. Robert Kiyosaki borrowed this concept, pay yourself first, from George Clausen's classic personal finance book, The Richest Man in Babylon. Robert advocates for prioritizing buying assets with each of our paychecks. Assets that can produce more income and thus grow our worth. And he goes as far as saying, deprioritizing creditors and the government. When I occasionally come short, I still pay myself first. I let the creditors and even the government scream. I like it when they get tough. Why? Because those guys do me a favor. They inspire me to go out and create more money. So I pay myself first, invest the money, and let the creditors yell. If I'm honest, I cringe a bit when I read this part of the book. Robert's argument is that he likes the pressure to build up, and the pressure inspires his financial genius. New ways of making more money. Maybe I don't have much financial genius, and I'm probably a lot more conservative than Robert Kiyosaki, but I personally don't agree with living on the edge like this. I like to make sure I pay all my bills on time. I also like to maintain a very low overhead to ensure I don't let the pressure build up. But I also wonder if this is why Robert Kiyosaki is worth over $100 million, and I'm here wearing the same shirt every day. Regardless, the main takeaway from this lesson is to prioritize buying assets with your hard-earned money. Assets that will grow your wealth in the long run. Number 8 lesson from Rich Dad Poor Dad. The importance of paying for good advice. Today, I have expensive attorneys, accountants, real estate brokers, and stockbrokers. Why? Because if, and I do mean if, the people are professionals, their services should make you money. It's very important that you surround yourself with the right people if you want to grow your net worth. However, you have to be very careful about who you allow into your inner circle. I may be a skeptic, but there are so many people out there who sell themselves as good counsel, but are actually just salespeople, or individuals whose incentives just doesn't align with you. What I like to do is hire people for very specific purposes and for a limited scope before I assign more responsibilities. I've hired money experts before in the past to give me unbiased money advice, but I was also very specific about what feedback I was trying to get. My investment portfolio, my spending plan, or a specific career feedback. The number 9 lesson from Rich Dad Poor Dad. The importance of finding your investment vehicle to wealth. Robert Kiyosaki gets a lot of bad rep for his overemphasis on real estate and small cap stocks. Most of his examples are related to real estate, how he was able to find certain deals, and how he was able to buy it at below asking price. So much so that after reading this book, just like I thought when I first read it 20 years ago, I felt like I needed to start driving around my neighborhood and look for rental properties. However, as Robert states himself, he's using real estate for most of his examples because that's what he's familiar with. He does clarify that these are just examples. I do not recommend anything that I do. The examples are just that, examples. If the opportunity is too complex and I do not understand the investment, I don't do it. Simple math and common sense are all you need to do well financially. So if real estate doesn't seem like something that interests you or doesn't fit with your lifestyle, no need to try to fit a square peg in a round hole. That's why I personally am a big fan of simple broad market index fund as my primary wealth growing vehicle. I have a much better understanding of the stock market and public companies as a whole, and it makes sense for my lifestyle. I do invest in real estate as well, but it makes up a much smaller proportion of my overall portfolio. The bottom line is invest in something you understand and feel comfortable with, not what someone tells you because that's what they're doing. It's all subjective because we're all so different. It's not gambling if you know what you're doing. It's gambling if you're just throwing money into a deal and praying. The number 10 lesson from Rich Dad Poor Dad. The importance of overcoming obstacles. The primary difference between a rich person and a poor person is how they manage fear. Financial knowledge is important, but it really doesn't do anything if we don't take action. If we aren't applying the knowledge to change our spending habits, allocate more income to buying assets, and testing out different investment vehicles, we're just a broke finance professor. We know a lot, but no result to show for our knowledge. Robert Kiyosaki reviews 5 reasons why we don't take action. Fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. Here are a few tips to overcome these roadblocks. 1. Overcoming fear. Recognize that you're going to fail. You're trying and testing out something new, so you aren't going to get it right the first time. However, failure is a great teacher. Failure inspires winners. Failure defeats losers. Embrace failure because the more you have, the more sign that you're making progress. 2. Overcoming cynicism. The cynic is really a little chicken. We all get a little chicken when fear and doubt clouds our thoughts. But recognize that just because you have doubt doesn't mean you need to respond in kind. You have the choice to how you can respond. You can continue being a cynic, or you can choose to reframe towards optimism. 3. Overcoming laziness. Have a little greed. Not the type of greed that steps over other people, but good greed that can push you to the next level of life. New inventions are made because we desire something better. We go to school and study hard because we want something better. So be okay with being a little greedy. It's the best cure for laziness. 4. Overcoming bad habits. We're the sum of our actions, and therefore our habits make all the difference. We know when we have bad habits. Sleeping late, eating too much, spending too much. So tackle one by one to replace bad ones with good ones. 5. Overcoming arrogance. Every time I have been arrogant, I have lost money. No matter how successful we may become with money, know that luck plays a much bigger role in our achievement than we may give it credit for. Just a few hundred years ago, the majority of the world population was barely eking out a living. The fact that ordinary individuals like you and I can have the opportunity to live like medieval kings and queens today shouldn't be discounted. Thank you guys for watching. The bottom line, I think Rich Dad Poor Dad is a good book. I say it shouldn't be the only personal finance book you read, but if you never picked it up, there's a lot of great nuggets to help you think about your finances. In the spirit of expanding our knowledge, please check out a few of my other favorite books here. Until next time, all the best.